That's okay.
Morning, Jill.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Lovely to see you.
Yeah. Sharing screen now. Hello, what's happened there? Okay. Got it. Right. Well, I've poured out an extract from the World Bible Commentary Book 2 under a thought of effecting regime change, because in a sense, Yahweh has been in the process of effecting regime change for some time in Israel and in the neighbouring countries. He effectively organised the rise of Assyria and the fall of Israel and some of the other nations around, and then then the fall of Judah in part, except for Jerusalem, and finally he's going to take out Jerusalem. He's going to cause the fall of Syria, and he's going to cause the rise of Babylon, and he's then going to cause the fall of Babylon and the rise of Persia, Media, Persia, and Persia. So this is a thought they had on affecting regime change. And their comment is that empires are often determined to change the regimes of client states. Effectively, you've got these other smaller groups which are like vassals to a larger group, and they want to make changes of the smaller players, never themselves. But Rome tried it in Israel in the 1st and 2nd century CE. The USA tried it in Iraq, and their comment is the process is often much more difficult and prolonged than was anticipated. Consider the attempts in Afghanistan. Consider the issues relating to Vietnam, and so we can go on. And Isaiah argues that God, or Yahweh, was determined to bring about a total change in the regimes and societies in the Near East in what we call the 8th to the 6th centuries BCE. Those to be changed include the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. And the process began with the destruction of existing social and political structures. Remember that there was the practice of the bigger places like Syria and Babylon to take captive people that were causing them trouble, relocate them to another part of their empire, and take people from another part of their empire and plug them back there. And what that did is it sort of put people into a totally different environment with no of the local social structures either way, and effectively that was a way of cutting out rebellions and so on. Now, he announced earlier on in chapters 5 and 6 that would take place, and he raised up the Assyrian nations and its leaders in the 8th and 7th centuries and sent them against Canaan and Egypt, and they destroyed much and deported whole populations, including Israel. He then raised up Babylon to complete the job, and Nebuchadnezzar did just that, destroying Jerusalem in 586 BC. That's in the 6th century, the way it works. Regime change required the substitution of another form of government. And then the Persian Empire was brought in to accomplish this. It was given the task of returning the Israelites to their heritage and rebuilding Jerusalem and its temple. Cyrus occupied Babylon in 539 BCE, and then the first delegation to restore Jerusalem was sent back in about 530 BC under a Judean prince named Sheshbazzar. Under Zerubbabel, in the reign of Darius, substantial progress was made toward the rebuilding of the temple, which was completed in 515, according to their ideas. Major changes had been accomplished for Judah and for each other countries in the region. Judah had been a more or less independent kingdom, a vassal of Egypt, a vassal of, he hasn't said it here, but they were a vassal of Assyria, and they became a vassal of Babylon too. Before it became a province of the vast Persian Empire and with an appointed governor, because remember that Cyrus was involved there. And many Judeans and Israelites lived abroad in Mesopotamia. That's in Assyria and Babylonia and in Egypt, because there were the ones that fled to Egypt, but were tied to Jerusalem by the temple and the festivals held there. Even more, they are ruled by the scriptures that have been promulgated by Ezra. Okay, so let's go to the chapter 34 and 35, which deal with the nations and people far and wide and Yahweh's future plans. This chapter begins with a call to all nations, including Israel and Judah, and a promise of judgment that has an application to Isaiah's time, but also sounds to me like end times day of the Lord judgment too, and involves dealing with heavenly hosts who oppose Yahweh. So let's look at the first part of the chapter. Come near and listen, you nations. Pay attention, you peoples. Well, who are? Let the earth / land and its contents or fullness. Listen, the world and its entire population. Now, the way I read that is the land is really the land of Palestine and the world, its entire population. If you read it as earth and world, it's involving everybody, both Israel, Judah, and the rest of the nations. For Yahweh is angry with all the nations, enraged with all their hordes, and he's vowed them to destruction. He's handed them over to slaughter. Their dead will be thrown away. The stench will rise. Isn't it terrible? The mountains will run with their blood. The entire array of heaven will fall apart or will fester, or it will rot away. Choose your application of the Hebrew word. The heavens will be rolled up like a scroll, and all their array will fade away, as fade the leaves falling from the vine, as fade those falling from the fig tree. For my soul has drunk deep in the heavens. Now there's a shift to a local application, but given Bozrah, which is Edom's capital, I think Bozrah means unpenetrable. Well, it could be a point that the place which is unpenetrable is nothing, is unpenetrable to the hand of Yahweh. It's mentioned the end time judgments in Isaiah chapter 63. So I think this is end times too. Also compare with Psalm 102:25. Long ago, you laid the earth's foundations, the heavens, the works of your hands. So they're talking about, the psalmist is talking about creation. They pass away, but you remain. In other words, basically, they won't last forever, but you remain, Yahweh. They all wear out like a garment, like old outworn clothes. You change them. And that's happened. That's going to happen, isn't it? Because in Revelation, we've got a new heaven and a new earth wherein dwells righteousness. And so he does actually change. This place we've got is wearing out, but you never alter and your years never end. Let's have a little look at Isaiah 63:1. Notice, day of vengeance, my year of retribution, angry with the nations. Okay, sorry. But you will find that this statement, day of vengeance, my year of retribution, will be repeated in the actual Isaiah chapter we're dealing with, is 34. A bit further in 34, you'll find that statement. But it says, who is this coming from Edom, from Bozrah in crimson garments? So magnificently dressed, marching, so full of strength. It's I, whose word is saving justice, whose power is to save. Who do you think this might be? I think it's Jesus. Why are your garments red? Your clothes like someone treading the winepress? What's the answer? I have trodden the winepress alone. Of my people, no one was with me. So I trod them down in my anger. I trampled them in my wrath. Their blood squirted over my garments, and all my clothes are stained, for I decided on a day of vengeance. My year of retribution has come. I looked, there was no one to help me, appalled, but could find no supporter. Then my own arm came to my rescue, and my own fury supported me. I crushed the peoples in my anger. I shattered them in my fury and sent their blood streaming to the ground. These are kind of links. And if I go up a bit further, day of vengeance, year of retribution. It doesn't have a my year of retribution down in the verse 8. It's got everything else, hasn't it? Because now they've moved from all the nations of the world to Edom, on the people vowed to destruction, to punish them. Yahweh's sword is gorged with blood, it's greasy with fat, with the blood of lambs and goats, and the fat of kidneys and rams. For Yahweh has a sacrifice in Bozrah, a great slaughter in the land of Edom. Wild oxen will fall with them. The bullocks with the bulls, their land will be drenched with blood, and their dust will be greasy with fat. For this will be Yahweh's day of vengeance, this year of retribution in Zion's lawsuit. Wow. Wow. Its streams will turn to pitch, its dust to brimstone, its country will turn into blazing pitch. And look at Sodom and Gomorrah, and also Gog and Magog. You've got a picture of destruction, and what follows is a picture of human desolation. Wow, human desolation. And there's actually quite a few interesting in this next series. There's quite a few interesting things like wildcats, hyenas, satyrs, Lilith, and snake, a particular type of snake, vultures, These are translations: pelican, hedgehog, owl, raven. Some of those are reasonably well known. Where are we? Good. And what have I done?
Settle down, mates.
I'm just trying to think of.
Settle down, mate.
There we go. There we go. I've got it across there to be able to see what's happening. So I'm going to stop the sharing now. I'm going to pause recording and I'm going to go back sharing my screen. And what's happened there? All right, go into share screen. Where are we?
The biggest problem for the Anzacs in the desert seemed to be the
What is happening? Dear Lord, please help me.
We can hear you, Jill. Tell us about the Anzacs.
well, it's showing recording, Graham, and it's the screen's up, so I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
Okay, I just couldn't see the screen. Sorry, Jill, you were saying?
They seem to be the scorpions and the spiders in the desert.
Right.
Got you. Verse 10, never quench day or night, its smoke rising forever. It will lie waste age after age. No one travel through it forever and ever. It will be the haunt of pelican, hedgehog, owl, and raven live there. There will be no more nobles to proclaim royal authority. There will be the end of all princes. Its princes. Brambles grow, thorn bushes. It will be a lair of jackals enclosed of wildcats, hyenas, satyr, Lilith too will lurk and find somewhere to rest. There's some later stuff on Lilith, but it's way future, where they sort of, Jewish people kind of developed a theology of Lilith, but it doesn't apply to this now. The snake will nest and lay eggs there. Its young, the shade, the vultures. Search in Yahweh's scroll and read, not one of these will be missing, not one of them lacking a mate, for thus his mouth is ordained it, with his spirit he's brought them together. He has thrown the lot for each, his hand has measured out their share. They will possess it forever and live their age after age. So this is kind of saying that there's going to be an utter devastation of Bozrah and Edom. However, I just think what Yahweh has destroyed, he can restore and fill with redeemed humanity.
Amen.
Let the desert and the dry lands be glad. If you see what I've done, I've put them in parallel. Let the wasteland rejoice and bloom, like as Fidel. Let it burst into flower. Let it rejoice and sing for joy. The glory of Lebanon is bestowed. The splendor of Carmel and Sharon is bestowed on it. Then they will see the glory of Yahweh, the splendor of our God in that time. And there's a word of encouragement. I don't know who from. Some people regard this as a kind of a chorus, and these are kind of kind people, saying, strengthen all weary hands, strengthen all trembling knees. Say to the faint-hearted, be strong, don't be afraid. Here is your God. Vengeance is coming, divine retribution. He's coming to save you. So in that time, before all the good stuff comes, there's the bad stuff beforehand, and people can be discouraged. And he's saying, don't be afraid, don't be faint-hearted, strengthen the hands. Then the eyes of the blind will be opened, the ears of the deaf unsealed. Then the lame will walk like a deer, sing for joy. For water will gush in the desert and streams in the wasteland. The parched ground will become a marsh for the thirsty land, springs of water, and the thirsty land, springs of water. The lairs where the jackals used to live will become plots of reed and papyrus, and they're plants that need lots of water, and you're looking at the desert just flourishing with tons of water. And through it will run a road for them, a highway, which we would call the sacred way or the holy way. The unclean won't be allowed to use it. He will be the one to use it, this road. Yahweh is the one. The fool will not stray along it. No lion will be there, no ferocious beast. Nothing of that sort we found. It will be used by the redeemed. For those whom Yahweh has ransomed will return. It's promising a situation with the return. They will come to Zion shouting for joy, their heads crowned with joy unending, rejoicing with gladness, and rejoicing in gladness will escort them, and sorrow and sighing will take flight. So it's a picture of redemption for Israel, and obviously something that is yet future. Hallelujah, hallelujah. I'm going to pause and I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to pause the recording. Recording, share screen. Okay, close. Okay, what am I doing? That's the wrong one. Here we go. This is what I want. So 35, if you like, 34 is trouble, 35 is restoration. We now move to King Hezekiah's reign and his interactions with Sennacherib. Sennacherib, king of Assyria, and then with the Babylonian envoys after his healing. So in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, advanced on all the fortified towns of Judah and captured them. And you could read that in Kings if you want, 2 Kings, but it's much the same. And from Lachish, the king of Assyria sent the cupbearer in chief with a large force to King Hezekiah in Jerusalem. You may or may not have been aware of it, but Hezekiah at this point in time, well, actually a little earlier at this point in time, had fortified a number of cities in Israel and in Judah. And he was connected with Egypt, and he'd organised some resistance around him, and he, if you like, he was the head of a resistance plot against Assyria. And so Sennacherib's come, and all those lovely fortified cities in Judah and I think in Israel that he did as well, they've been knocked off. And from Lachish, he sent with a large force to King Hezekiah in Jerusalem. And as well as that, Hezekiah had fortified Jerusalem. He'd organised the waterways so that he could withstand a siege because he'd have water. And this cupbearer in chief took up a position near the conduit of the upper pool on the road to the fuller's field. Why do you think he chose the upper pool on the road to the fuller's field? Could it be that it was because this was the source of water coming into Jerusalem, and maybe what he was going to suggest that I'm going to poison the water. You think your water's safe, but the water's got to come in from somewhere, pal. I don't know, but I just wondered why he chose that place. The master of the palace, Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, Shebna the secretary, and the herald Joash of Ace went out to him. The cupbearer in chief said to them, "Say to Hezekiah, the great king, the king of Assyria, says this: what makes you so confident? Do you think empty words are as good as strategy and military strength? Because we've got strategy, we've got military strength. Who are you relying on to dare to rebel against me?" says Sennacherib. Are you relying on that broken reed, Egypt, which pricks and pierces the hand of the person who leans on it? To imagine, he pictures Egypt, not unfairly, like a bamboo sharpened stick, so right through your hand. Yow! That is what Pharaoh, king of Egypt, is like to those who rely on him. And this whole argument is trying to undermine the strategy. And then he will talk in a language that the people on the wall can hear, because he wants to sow defeat. He wants them to give in. You may say to me, we rely on Yahweh our God. But haven't his high places and altars been suppressed by Hezekiah, who told Judah and Jerusalem, this is the altar before which you must worship? So he didn't have good strategy. He didn't understand the local thing, because those high places being suppressed weren't real worships of Yahweh at all. They were false worship. And that's why he did that. Very well then, make a wager with my lord, the king of Assyria. I will give you 2,000 horses if you can find horsemen to ride them. Ha ha, we know you haven't got them. How could you repulse a single one of the least of my master's soldiers? How could you repulse a single one of the least of my master's soldiers? And yet you have relied on Egypt for chariots and horsemen. Wow. And now this is where I believe he gets into real trouble. I have marched in this country to lay it waste without what. And lastly, have I marched on this country to lay it waste without warrant from Yahweh? And in a sense, that's true. Then he's claiming Yahweh himself said to me, march in this country and lay it to waste. You know, there's an element of truth in that, isn't there?
Yes.
So he's not doing too bad yet. And then they go on, and then he goes on in 11, 12, and 13. Then 13, where he's saying like here in 12, he's speaking to the people sitting on the ramparts of the walls, doomed to eat their own dung and drink their own wee. Well, listen what the words of the great king of Assyria, the king says, don't let Hezekiah delude you. He will be powerless to save you. Don't let Hezekiah persuade you to rely on Yahweh by saying, Yahweh is sure to save us. This city will not fall into the king of Assyria's clutches. Well, that's what Yahweh had said. But he's saying, no, no good. Don't listen to Hezekiah, for the king of Assyria says, make peace with me, surrender to me. Every one of you will be free to eat the fruit of your own vine, eat of your own fig tree, and drink the water of your own storage well, until I come to take you away to a country like your own, a land of corn, good wine, the land of bread and vineyards. So he's promising something good. Could well be. But it'll be a land where you haven't got the social support, where you really can't foment rebellion. Don't let Hezekiah delude you by saying Yahweh will save us, because that's what Hezekiah's been saying. And this now is where he gets into deep trouble. So far, he's arguing Yahweh won't save you, but he then says, has any God of any nation be able to save this country from the king of Assyria's clutches? No. Where are the gods of Hamath and Arphad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim? Where are the national gods of Samaria? We'll leave the national gods of Samaria. We've knocked them off, and all the idols from the places they've gone. Did they save Samaria from my clutches? Isn't that Samaria? Isn't that Yahweh? Of all the national gods, which one have saved their countries from my clutches? That Yahweh should be able to save Jerusalem from my clutches. He missed the part that Yahweh isn't the same, because Yahweh is the one true God. They, however, kept trying and said nothing, since the king had given the order, you are not to answer him. Basically, the rest of that chapter is where they tear their clothes, go to Hezekiah and report. On hearing this, Hezekiah tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and he goes to the temple of Yahweh. You can't fault him here. He sent the elders and priests wearing sackcloth to Isaiah, and they said to him, this is what Hezekiah says. Today is a day of suffering, of punishment, of disgrace. Children come to birth with no strength to bring them forth. And then he starts praying, this intensely prayerful man. May Yahweh, your God, hear the words of the cupbearer in chief, whom his master, the king of Assyria, has sent to insult the living God. And may Yahweh, your God, punish the words he has heard. Offer your prayer for the remnant still left. And when Yahweh's ministers came to Isaiah, he said to them, say to your master, Yahweh says this, don't be afraid of the words which you've heard, or the blasphemies, the evil speaking, which the king of Assyria's minions have uttered against me. It's not against you, Hezekiah, it's against me. Look, I'm going to put a spirit in him, and on the strength of a rumor, he will go back to his own country, and in that country I shall make him fall by the sword. We now heed the cupbearer turns around, rejoiced the king of Assyria, who was then attacking Libnah. And the cupbearer, having learnt that the king had already left Lachish, on hearing that, Tirhaka, king of Cush, that's an Egyptian attack, was on his way to attack him. That's the rumour. And so God is faithful. He sent him on a wild goose chase. Tell Hezekiah, king of Judah, this: don't let your God, on whom you're relying, deceive you with a promise. Jerusalem will not fall to the king of Syria's clutches. You have learned by now what the kings of Assyria done to all the other countries. And he goes on and he's on and he's on, repeating the same thing. But Hezekiah's prayer response is so very good. He refuses to, in all that situation. I mean, it is a fact. None of the gods of our nations were able to stop them. And Yahweh didn't stop the fortified cities of Judah being taken either, because he hadn't promised to keep those. He promised to destroy them. And he'd promised to protect Jerusalem from the king of Assyria, because he was saving the job for Babylon. But Hezekiah's response and prayers, he refuses to believe any of Sennacherib's lies or the weight of the facts of history, of defeats of those who rebelled against him. Hezekiah knows and believes that Yahweh is the one true God. So what's he do? He took the letter from the messenger's hands, because they wrote it out, and he went up to the temple of Yahweh and he spreads it before Yahweh, and he says this prayer in the presence of Yahweh. Yahweh Sabaoth, God of Israel, enthroned on the winged creatures, you alone are God of all the kingdoms of the world. You made the heaven and earth. Give ear, Yahweh, and listen. Open your eyes, Yahweh, and see. Hear the words of Sennacherib, who is sent to insult the living God. It is true, Yahweh, that the kings of Assyria have destroyed all the nations and their countries. They have thrown their gods on the fire, for those were not gods but human artifacts, wood and stone, and hence they have destroyed them. But now, Yahweh, our God, save us from his clutches, I beg you, and let all the kingdoms of the world know that you alone are God, Yahweh. That's a great prayer, isn't it?
Yes.
He's not living in fairyland. He knows the reality of what the king of Assyria is and what he's done, but he's calling out to Yahweh on the basis of a promise he'd heard earlier. Isaiah, son of Amos, sent the following message to Hezekiah. Yahweh, God of Israel, says this in answer to the prayer which you have addressed to me about Sennacherib, king of Assyria. Here is the pronouncement which Yahweh has made about him. She despises you. She scorns you, the virgin daughter of Zion. She tosses her head at you, the daughter of Jerusalem. That's a picture of the scorn of Jerusalem. Whom have you insulted? Whom did you blaspheme? Against whom have you raised your voice and lifted your haughty eyes? Against the Holy One of Israel. Through your minions, you have insulted the Lord, thinking, with my many chariots, I've climbed the mountaintops, the utmost peaks of Lebanon. I have felled its mighty cedars, its finest cypress, have reached its furthest peak, its forest garden. Yes, I've dug and drunk of foreign waters. Under the soles of my feet, I dried up all Egypt's rivers. Do you hear? Long ago, I prepared this. From the days of old, I actually planned it. Now I carry it out. You were, Sennacherib, to lay walled cities in heaps of ruins. That was why their inhabitants, feeble of hand, were dismayed and discomfited, were weak as grass, were frail as pards, were like the grass of the housetop and meadows under the east wind. And whether you stand up or sit down, or whether you go out and come in, I know it. And how you rave against me. How stupid. Isn't that encouraging? God knows everything. When we stand up or sit down, whether I go out, whether I come in, God knows it. And I'm not raving against him. Oh, no. And Sennacherib, because you've raved against me and your arrogance has reached my ears, I shall put it through your nostrils and a muzzle on your lips and make you return by the road which you came. And this will be a sign for you. It's really talking to Judah now. This year will be eaten. This year will be eaten the self-sown grain. Next year, what sprouts in the fallow. The third year, sow and reap, plant vineyards and eat their fruit. The surviving remnant of the house of Judah will bring forth new roots below and fruits above. For a remnant will issue from Jerusalem and survivors from Mount Zion. Yahweh's jealous love will accomplish this. This then is what Yahweh says about the king of Assyria. He will not enter this city, will shoot no arrow at it, confront it with no shield, throw up no earthwork against it. By the road which he came, by that he will return. He will not enter this city, declares Yahweh. I shall protect this city and save it for my sake and my servant David's sake. That same night, the angel of Yahweh went out and struck down 185,000 men in the Assyrian camp. In the early morning, when it was time to get up, there they lay, so many corpses. So Sennacherib struck camp and left, returned home and stayed in Nineveh. And one day when he was worshipping the temple of his god Nisroch, his sons Adramelech and Sharezer struck him down with a sword and escaped into the territory of the Urartu or Ararat, and his son Esarhaddon succeeded him. Wow. Wow. What do you think of that? And share screen. Where are we? Share screen. Here we go. And I thought a lesson from this next chapter is if you can leave on a high note, it's better to go than plead for prolonging this life. And about then, so this is Hezekiah fell ill and was at the point of death. And the prophet Isaiah, son of Amos, came and said to him, Yahweh says this, put your affairs in order, for you're going to die, you will not live. And Hezekiah turned his face to the Lord and addressed this prayer to Yahweh. Yahweh, remember, I beg you that I behave faithfully and with sincerity of heart in your presence and done what you regard as right. and Hezekiah shed many tears. And I think that's pretty good for this point in time. Wasn't a perfect light, but basically he'd been pretty good. Then the word of Yahweh came to Isaiah. Go and say to us, Hezekiah, Yahweh, the God of your ancestor David, says this: I've heard your prayer and seen your tears. It's not just prayer. The level of tears, I think, brings a different aspect of the prayer, the intensity. I shall cure you. In 3 days' time, you'll go up to the temple of Yahweh. I shall add 15 years for your life. I shall save you and the city from the king of Assyria's clutches and defend the city for my sake and my servant David's sake. Here, Isaiah replied, is a sign from Yahweh. Isaiah replied, is a sign from Yahweh that he will do what he has said. Because later on we're going to find in this chapter that Hezekiah was looking for a sign. Look, I shall make the shadow cast by the declining sun on the steps. The steps to Ahab's roof room go back 10 steps. And the sun went back 10 steps by which it had declined. So that meant the shadow, instead of lengthening, was going to go backwards. So the sun didn't just stand still, it went backwards. And then he sang this canticle, or this song of Hezekiah, king of Judah, after his illness and recovery. And in this, these are some of his thoughts. And I think some of his thoughts are wrong. I thought, in the noon of my life, I am to depart. Well, maybe he was past noon. At the gates of Sheol, I shall be held for the rest of my days. Yep. I thought, I shall never see Yahweh again in the land of the living. Yes. I shall never see again a single one of those who live on earth. Yes. But you will see Yahweh beyond the land of the living, because there's nowhere you can get from Yahweh's presence. My home has been pulled up and thrown away like a shepherd's tent, like a weaver. I've rolled up my life. He has cut me off from the loom. From dawn to dark, you've been making an end of me. Yep. Till daybreak, I cried for help like a lion. He has crushed all my bones. From dawn to dark, you've been making an end of me. He's talking about his illness. I twitter like a swallow. I moan like a dove. My eyes have grown dim for looking up. Lord, I'm overwhelmed. Come to my help. I don't think that's a bad one to highlight, is it? Lord, I'm overwhelmed. Come to my help. How can I speak? What can I say to him? He is the one to act. I must eke out the rest of my years in bitterness of soul. Is that true? Is that true? We'll talk about that later on after we finish this. Must he eke out the rest of his years? Actually, that why should he do that? Post-healing? Surely he would be rejoicing. If not, if he's dealing with the shortness of time, does it have to be in bitterness of soul? The Lord is over them. They live, and everything lives by his spirit. You will cure me, restore me to life. That's what he was looking for. At once, my bitterness turns to well-being. Okay, so the bitterness is associated with the fact that he doesn't think God is going to heal him. For you have preserved my soul from the pit of nothingness, and you have thrust all my sins behind you. I'm not sure that's because of sin that he was dying. Sometimes God took him early because of things that were going to be hard. For Sheol can't praise you. Maybe not, but people in Sheol can, nor death celebrate you. Those who go down to the pit can hope no longer in your constancy. Is that true? No. But did he feel that? Yes. And that's why he's desperately clinging. This is a true statement of what he felt. It doesn't have to be truth in terms of this is the truth. Because God communicates. There's nowhere if I go down to the Sheol, he is there, especially in the good part of Sheol. Because we've learnt later on there are two parts. The living are the ones who praise you. This is as I do today. Fathers tell their sons about constancy. He is very focused on this life. And he thinks this life is all there is, and he's got that wrong. Yahweh, come to my help, and we make our harps resound all the days of our life in the temple of Yahweh. Bring a fig poultice, Isaiah said. Apply it to the ulcer, and he will recover. And Hezekiah said, what sign will you tell me that I'll be going up to the temple of Yahweh? And that's why God calls the sun's shadow to go into reverse. Hezekiah is so full of God healing him, he fails to walk closely with God, and he lays the foundation for future disaster. And I think his attitude show how far he has fallen from his earlier position of faith, or how he was not quite as good as he looked. At that time, Hezekiah, the king of Babylon, Merodach-Baladan, we've heard of him, son of Baladan, sent a letter to Hezekiah, for he heard of his illness and recovery. And Hezekiah was delighted, and he showed the ambassador his entire treasury. Wow. He showed him the lot. The silver, the gold, the spices, precious oil, his armory too, and everything to be seen in his storehouses. There was nothing in his palace or in his whole domain he didn't show them. Isn't that stupid? He was so full of, like Merodach-Baladan, that lovely Merodach-Baladan. Merodach-Baladan was a pretty tricky, selfish king, and he was a player. The prophet Isaiah then came to King Hezekiah and asked him, what have these men said? Where have they come to you from? Hezekiah asked, they've come from a distant country, from Babylon. Isaiah said, what have they seen in your palace? They've seen everything. There's nothing in my storehouse, as I have not shown them. Wow. Then Isaiah said to Hezekiah, listen to the word of Yahweh Sabaoth. The days are coming when everything in your palace, everything your ancestors have amassed until now, will be carried off to Babylon. Wow. Let's whack in a who's speaking? Can I get you to? I'm in the middle of a Bible study at the moment. You call me in 10 minutes. Days are coming when everything carried off to Babylon. That's not a green one. Oh no, that's really meant to be a red one. Trouble. Not a thing will be left. Wow, that's a bad one, isn't it? Yahweh says, sons have sprung from you, sons begotten by you will be abducted to be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Okay, fellas, eunuchs. How would you like that? Yuck. Hezekiah said to Isaiah, this word of Yahweh that you announce is reassuring. What's reassuring about everything being carried off? Your sons castrated, carried off to the palace of the kings of Babylon. And he said it's reassuring because he's thinking there's peace and security during my lifetime. Wow. If that isn't sort of, I reckon, a terrible situation type of thing, I don't know what. Stopping sharing.